First hearing was convened on September 18, 2019, with the representatives of the Ministry of National Security, the AT&T Prison Service, and Vision on Mission. We also advise that members of the public are invited to submit their comments and/or questions via the Parliament's social media platforms. At this point, I'd like to ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting on my right with Member Hussain.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Christine Uwalo Hussain, I'm member.
Yes, good morning to all. Esmond Ford, member of this committee.
Good morning, Alison West, member.
And I'm the committee's chair, Paul Richards. We also have members absent who are Member Glenda Jennings-Smith, Member Ruhan Sinanan, and Member Khadija Amin. Most of that is the West Euro brief. Thank you once again for joining us. All right, at this point, I'd like to outline the stakeholders who are with us today. In terms of prisoner rehabilitation, we have the Way of Holiness and New Hope Ministries. We also have representatives from the Prison Officers Association. We also have reformed ex-offenders, Ms. Stacey Beckles, who is also a motivational speaker, Mr. Dane Manikchand, advocate for greater inclusion for ex-prisoners, and Mr. Garth St. Clair, host of the radio talk show Eye on Dependency. At this point, I'm going to invite stakeholders through their representatives to introduce themselves, starting with Mr. Seron Richards.
Good morning, committee members. My name is Seron Richards. I'm a prison officer at Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. I'm also the president of the Prison Officers Association of Trinidad and Tobago.
Good morning. My name is Lester Walcott. I'm the General Secretary of the Prison Officers Association.
Mr. Manikchand.
Good morning. My name is Dane Manikchand. Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee, and members of the general viewing public. I was incarcerated at Career Convict Prison for approximately 12 years for my sole crime of false imprisonment. I've been back in society for approximately 9 years, and I've made myself available to the community and the general public to discuss some of the issues that ex-offenders face in re-entry into public society.
Thank you. I apologize, Mr. Yuxi. Okay, go ahead.
Mr. Yuxi.
Prison officers. I'm sorry.
My name is Aloy Yuxi. I'm a former prison welfare officer, social worker, and mediator.
Mr. St. Clair.
Good morning. I am Garth St. Clair, former prisoner, former client of the Trinidad and Tobago prison system. After spending 6 months, I am back in society for the last 28 years, and I've been hosting the program, Drug Demand Reduction Prevention Program, and Dependency. I'm also recovering addict as well.
Thank you. Way of Holiness.
Good morning. I am Pastor Wilma Kelly. I'm a senior pastor of the Way of Holiness.
Thank you. New Hope Prison Ministry. Could you turn on your microphone, please?
No, but before, I don't want to put on the microphone. I want that before I say anything. I find personally two things I want to say.
All this is, at this point, is introductions. So.
No, I ain't talking about the introduction. I find you didn't have a way of where to start on.
Well, I appreciate that, but that's not our procedure.
I know the procedure.
No, it's not.
But then you must send procedures to the proper.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Barker. I do 13 years in prison with the cat o' nine tail, and I opened the prison ministry when I was down in Carrera in 1975. That is how everything started down there. Richard Barker, Collins Rosales, Fuquachin, Nunez, all of us was there in the prisons, and Brother Clyde Haynes and all of us. This is how the thing started, and I really surrender myself to object to help not only ex-prisoners or prisoners, but to help the community to develop themselves in a right way. So we could do the right thing at the right time to the right person for the right purpose. Because a wise man learn from his mistakes, but a wiser man learn from other people's mistakes.
Thank you.
Wisdom build a house, knowledge furnish it, but understanding live in it. And that is that is my purpose.
Thank you so much. All right, Ms. Beckles.
Good morning, Chair and members of this esteemed committee. I am Stacey Ann Beckers, former inmate, now ordained Reverend, President of Women of Transmission, an NGO. My mission is working with former inmates, particularly women, to teach them life-transforming skills and encouragement of restoration. My goal is not only to encourage, but bring improvement to my community and the people of my absolute beautiful country. One of my greatest desires this morning is to see that we who were incarcerated and those who are coming out get that transformation to their lives by having their records expunged. I wish to thank this committee for granting me the opportunity to share my experiences, challenges, and my success. Hopefully my recommendations offered today will be accepted. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Garcia.
Good morning. My name is Rudolph Garcia. I'm a retired prison officer too, now member of the Way of Holiness Church. Thank you.
Mr. Lacroix.
Pleasant morning to the community. My name is Richard Lacroix. I'm a member of the New Prison Ministry, which was established 1975 at the Carrier Convict Prison. Became an NGO on August 18, 1988. Objective to awake the conscience of the inmates through the teachings of good orderly direction, so that he or she could have a solid foundation to stand on his release, one that is built on the principles of patience, self-sacrifice, and dependency on good. Thus, having these powerful virtues, we lead to a life of good self-governance. Aim to continue to produce ex-inmates to live an exemplary life on re-entry into society, to do the right thing at the right time to the right person for the right purpose. Programs to assist and develop ex-inmates, church service to provide spiritual guidance and moral support, jobs placements, financial support, good clothing and food, clothing and shelter, small business management sponsored by the Ministry of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. We have three objectives in this inquiry: to examine the social, psychological, and financial challenges to societal reintegration experienced by former prisoners. 2, to assess the services and facilities available to support the reintegration of former prisoners into society. And 3, to assess the adequacy of policies and laws to treat with prisoner reentry into society. Right? I'm just going to simply ask for the Supreme Being's blessings in our proceedings today. I think that would suffice everyone. All right, just a matter of housekeeping. We remind committee members and officials and stakeholders to direct your questions through me, the chair. Please put on your microphones to deliver your comments or questions. And we ask you at this time, if you have not yet, to put your telephones on mute, or you can turn them off, all right? Thank you all again for being here. Now, just to give some context, let me just go through some information that we received in terms of recidivism rates, offender categories, and money spent on inmates to transport inmates annually in Trinidad and Tobago. Recidivism rates, according to the Ministry of National Security, submitted to this JSC on Social Services and Public Administration from 2014 to 2018. The rates are 2014, 50%, 2015, 54%, 2016, 51%, 2017, 55%, and 2018, 51%. The reoffender offenses profile most prevalent includes drug offenses and property offenses. And from the data I just read there, it means that more of the persons who are being released in society are ending back up into the system. In terms of the prison population, if convicted of serious minor offenses, percentage of prisoners in the prison population convicted of serious crimes, 75.3%, and in the convicted of minor offenses, 24.7%. And that is part of the reason that we are engaging in this inquiry. It is to really look at the system, the challenges that persons, ex-offenders face when they're coming out into the system, into the wider population, in terms of possibly getting jobs, staying on the straight and narrow, and the circumstances and conditions which may be facilitating their easy return into the system and them not being able to become productive members of society. Also, the average monthly upkeep for an inmate at the Immigration Detention Center is approximately $7,500, and the average monthly upkeep for an inmate at remand yard at Golden Grove in Port of Spain Prison and the Carrera Island Prison is $15,736. So it is in our interest in Trinidad and Tobago to provide a proper restorative justice and rehabilitation system so that we can facilitate inmates re-engaging society in a productive manner. Let me start with the officials from the Prison Officers Association with Mr. Richards, who is the president of the Officers Association. In your interface with inmates, particularly those who end back up in the system, give us a sense of what you think is their mindset while in the system in terms of their exposure to rehabilitation protocols, restorative justice, so that their mindset is changed going out to try to become more productive citizens. Is that adequate, and what is your experience?
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, and to the panel. The reality is you have to look at reintegration from the earliest point to the point of actually re-entering society. And the earliest point will be at the court level, because in a proper reintegration system, the court in most countries, in most modern countries, deals with strategic sentencing. So at that level of the court, once criminogenic needs will be assessed, reports will be given to the court by either social workers, legal practitioners, other professionals and so on, and that will assist the court in providing the type of sentence necessary to treat with the inmate's need. Upon entry into the service, we supposed to, in a best case scenario, have what is called an assessment center or a reception center. At that reception center, then the inmate's criminogenic needs will be further assessed, and a number of interventions can be made, treatment for rehabilitation and so on. All right? You ask the question, how does the inmate feel when after all of that, re-entering the system and so on? Of course, to assess the feelings of the inmate, that feelings will sort of be reflective of the type of treatment met out to the inmates while incarcerated, and of course, the treatment met out to the inmate after incarceration. When you look at before incarceration, because of the impediments that are involved in our internal system, because one, we do not have strategic sentencing from the court as we should. We should develop towards that point. Two, the prison is still in absence of a reception center, a designated area where persons can come in from the court and can be monitored over time, ideally a few months before their criminogenic needs are noticed and noted, and then they will be dispatched to various areas for treatment and rehabilitation. So from the external point of view, those inmates who re-enter society, because make no bones about this, over 90% of the inmates that come into the prison system will end up back into society. That is a fact. And when you look at the shortcomings in the reintegration process, you look at opportunities that are available to the inmates upon reentry. You look at jobs, you look at training, you look at a soft landing, because you would appreciate after you spend X amount of years in the prison system, you would have been all but lost. And you need some sort of soft landing. In some countries, they call it halfway houses, right? So that you do not have to be exposed to the full brunt of what society expects at that time. Now, some of the most notable impediments, and we'd have been complaining about it ad nauseum, is the fact of employability. And that is seriously and adversely impacted on simply because when persons pass through the system, they have now what is called a criminal record. And persons who are owners of business, persons who are, who the public service and any other entity, the standard for employing persons in Trinidad and Tobago has emerged over the years as one, first and foremost, having a criminal record available to the employer, and that criminal record, that certificate of good character, as they call it, will, tell the person or the employers your history as it relates to crime.
Now, the Ministry of National Security has highlighted a list of mechanisms used to, quote-unquote, divert ex-prisoners from returning to lives of crime, including academic education, vocational training, religious intervention, life skills development, sporting activities, music, culture and arts, agriculture, inmate radio station, inmate debate, vision and mission, mentorship, and concrete furniture making. From your experience or any of your colleagues in the Prison Officers Association who are exposed on a daily basis to these inmates while they are incarcerated on their way through serving their sentences, is any psychological analysis, psychometric testing done to track, if you would, the mindset progress of these inmates on their way to finishing, completing their sentences, so that some sort of assessment document can be provided, even when they come out to say, well, this person has shown some remorse, this person has engaged in X and Y to change their life, they've engaged in a certain number of programs in the prison with a certain amount of points, so that they have a document or some sort of resource to show that they are on their way to rehabilitation, and a person can take a chance on them.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and of course to the panel. I just want to reiterate something that Mr. Richard just mentioned. When inmates come into prison, they go through an assessment process. It's called a length of service case management inventory, and it does assess the deficiencies of these inmates, whether it is be educational or family issues or whatever the issues are. It looks at the risk factors involved that they may pose to the community. It looks at the criminogenic factors and all the various attitudes and so on, like, for instance, impulsive behavior, anger, and all these things. And from that assessment, there we start to do a proper development of an intervention program. The Welfare Department in particular, in more recent times, I've seen that they have now gone into case management, which is now individualizing the interventions, so that in doing that, they will be doing a much more in-depth piece of work relative to the rehabilitation of inmates. So that is what I see. But I don't think that there is a document or paper that you can say, okay, this person has arrived at, let's say, 70% rehabilitation rate or whatever, in terms of monitoring and measuring whatever is being done. I think that might be an area for strengthening, because I am not aware of such a document. But of course, I would say that it has to come, if it's not, it has to come into being, because you have to measure what you're doing.
Thank you. Member Hussain.
Thank you. Just to ask Mr. Richards, the strategic sentencing that you refer to, what countries have strategic sentencing, and where have you seen it being successfully implemented? And of course, what it is we're trying to, in fact, prevent is, in fact, you have data to support.
Well, if you look at the Scandinavian countries, including Holland, Denmark, Sweden, they have a history. As a matter of fact, they have a lot of information that we could tap from. They actually, in the Scandinavian countries now, they are closing down prisons because their system is working so well that the rate of recidivism is very low. So a lot of prisons are being closed down in those Scandinavian countries, namely Holland at this time. And that is because they look at sentencing from almost a purely treatment level. So in other words, you, at the court, you are assessed as to the type of illness you have. Let us nickname crime an illness, right? And based on the type of illness you have, and I'm relating the crime here, you are then sentenced in a manner that could assist those organizations now who have to continue this assessment and treatment to do their job. So the sentencing starts from at the court level, and then it's drilled down to the prison, and the prison now will have the apparatus and all the different things set up to further assess, monitor, and evaluate so that that person can be treated with throughout the duration of their sentences. And based on what Mr. Yuxi was saying, based on his experience as a former welfare officer, and he put it correctly, yes, there are facets of that in our system, but where we haven't reached is proper policies and practice that will put it into a proper, more systematic kind of manner so that we will derive the kind of benefits that we are looking for. Because prison exists, modern day prison, I said, exists for crime prevention. That is what modern day prison exists for.
Thank you, Mr. Richards, and I understand where it is you're going from, because you're looking at the preventative as opposed to the post.
That's absolutely correct.
And Mr. Yuxi, I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yes, you have.
You spoke about when you come in, the prisoner comes in, you have something called length of service.
Case management inventory. It is a fourth-generation criminal assessment tool.
And you're indicating that this is already in place, and the responsibility really of the welfare officers to ensure that the prisoner, when they come into the system, that they in fact some sort of although you may not have had a strategic sentencing, you may have some aspects of it being implemented in the system. How successful has this been, and how long has this program been in existence?
Okay, thank you for that question. In terms of the length of service case management inventory, that came in just in the last few years, but it's actually prison officers who actually who are trained to administer that tool. The welfare officers now come in, they're doing case management. That's a more in-depth study in terms of the psychological, sociological causes. They do a lot of biosocial reports on inmates, giving that holistic picture of what's happening. And I'm saying that these processes are important because the only way you could develop effective interventions is by having proper assessments. And I wanted also to comment on something quickly. Again, that came up, and I think it's very important. I heard Mr. Seven talking about the strategic, sentencing from the court and so on. For us, we term that as, in terms of the criminal justice system, we call that the therapeutic jurisprudence. That's the name for that, therapeutic jurisprudence. So what a magistrate or a judge would be further trained beyond law in the area of sociology, psychology, social work, and all these other human behavior areas and fields, so that if a young person comes before them, it's not just dealing with them how we deal with it right now. Our criminal justice system is largely retributive. Fines, imprisonment, reprimand and discharge. When a therapeutic justice system, a young person or first-time offender comes before them, you're looking at the justice diversion. You don't want that young person to be contaminated by being in the prison and being criminalized and all the rest of it. Have to deal with a record and all the stigmatizations, stereotyping, labeling, that goes with that. You have somebody who is a substance abuser. That magistrate will want, 10 different, infractions of the law for larceny. When you do a little further check, he has an addiction problem. So treatment and mental health, you can at least detect that and so on, say, okay, this person may need some psychiatric evaluation. The bottom line is there's diversity within the population that comes before you.
Thank you. And if I could just ask a follow-up later, but from Mr. Sinclair, I read in your document paper, your submission, you highlighted the need for a drug rehabilitation facility in the prison system. And I'm wondering if this facility that you're referring to is in fact what it is Mr. Richards as well as Mr. Yuxi is in fact suggesting, if it's a form of rehabilitation in the prison system, strategic sentencing.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I have to agree with Mr. Yuxi. That's exactly what I meant when I submitted that. As a matter of fact, there was one. But unfortunately, as we know, nothing is carved in stone here. So from under the last administration, for some reason, there were some issues that, and instead of examining the issues and sorting it out, they throw the baby with the bathwater and shut it down. If I had the benefit of a rehab facility, then among so many of my colleagues, things would have turned out differently, because the way that is done, the person is allowed now to go through the system. Once they graduate successfully, then they come up with a clean record, rather than having a conviction now, and I had to go now look for a presidential pardon. So it's very, very important.
Mr. Chair, if I could add, we have visited countries, namely the United States, even later Jamaica, and what you see existing in the United States as best practice for those type of scenarios, because you did say, Mr. Chair, in your earlier submissions, that recidivism is somewhere between 50 to 56% based on the numbers you would have been calling out over the years. And you said, which is significant, that the majority is drug offenders. So right away, it tells you something. In the absence of what they deem in other countries maybe to be mental health units or drug rehab centers within prison walls, are to treat with those persons who have those factors, who have those deficiencies. Prison officers, as we are today, we are not really trained to treat with drug users. We are not trained to treat with those type of cases. In extreme cases, what has been the practice, and it is facilitated by law, is that some of those persons will be sent to St. Anne's for further treatment and assessment and so on. And if that situation no longer exists, then they may be sent back to the prison. But the reality is, in a best case scenario, when you look at best practices, one of the key features in any prison establishment that speak to proper rehabilitation and so on is the establishment of drug treatment centers, or in some countries they call it a mental health unit, outfitted with the necessary professionals and the type of persons who can assess properly and then apply treatment to those individuals. And maybe that is what is accounting for the high rate of recidivism, as you would have correctly stated.
Member Ford and then Member West.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mr. Richards, right? You sit as the president of the association in the prison service.
Yes, I do.
Right. In terms of full participation, full cooperation of what your superiors would put in place with regards to the rehabilitation process in the prison service, as the president, you have full support of your organization and so on, in terms of the prison officers participating in the process, seeing it as their roles and responsibilities to assist with the rehabilitation of these prisoners, inmates, as the case may be?
Yes, I think we would have excelled through leaps and bounds over the years in developing those sorts of constructive regimes within the prison to aid in the proper rehabilitation of inmates. The problem is, and we would have always stated this problem ad nauseam in the public domain, is the lack of resources, lack of proper infrastructure, right? Lack of some of the things that are necessary for proper delivery of our objectives. For
example, give some examples as you go along.
For example, we would have said over the years, and I said it in my opening remarks, we don't have a reception center, right? That is something that is key, right? It is something that is key. Upon entry, you properly assess those inmates. Then we have things like sporting programs. We have to further develop those things. We have to develop the infrastructure to have more trade shops and more technical, vocational, and even educational areas, so that persons could properly participate. Now, another key thing that is existing in other countries, because I visited Miami, and I was shocked to see in their federal detention center that participating in these programs is a must. It is legislated there. You must participate. In Trinidad and Tobago, it is up to your own volition to participate. Even in those countries with the use of parole systems, which is conditional release systems, which is hinged on your participation in these type of constructive regimes, you know, and the benefit of that could be parole and other conditions attached, and other benefits attached to a sentence and so on, that you will enjoy as an inmate. So all these areas we have to develop, but I must say, as it regards to rehabilitation, and reintegration, yes, the prison service is on one page. The Prison Officers Association and the prison admin are in a good position. We collaborate a lot on rehabilitation and so on, the extent to which you would have seen a number of developments in that area. But of course, as I'm stating to you here now, there is further developments that we will want, and it will require resources.
Okay, and to follow up again, Mr. Richards, again, you all would have documented, send necessary report to your superiors in order that they can then send further to the Minister of National Security accordingly. What you're saying have been documented based on your visits to Miami, Jamaica, and assessment. You all would have
Yes, based on what we would have experienced, based on the knowledge that we would have attained in those countries, of course, those knowledge will be the subject of discussions and so on in a way to harmonize our local situation and bring it more within the context of what is accepted internationally, right?
Sure.
But
one other thing, Mr. Chairman, again, with regards to the ex-prisoners also, we were informed by the Commissioner of Prisons that there's a 2-year period after prisoners exit the prison system, right, that there is, let me quote it exactly, welfare officers also provide follow-up support to ex-prisoners up to 2 years after release. However, ex-prisoners are not legally mandated to accept this support. So I'd like to hear your comment on that, and then I'd like to hear the comment of the ex-inmates that we have, if that system is in place, and what you all can say with regards to that particular aspect. So after you comment, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get the inmates of...
Well, I'll pass it on to Mr. Yuxi to comment on.
Thank you. With respect to that issue, yes, there is a 2-year period where after release, in the post-release period, 2 years, welfare officers are supposed to be doing follow-up on these ex-offenders and so on. And, but I'll tell you, in my own experience, I have not seen that taking place to the extent that it requires. But there is an awareness, there is in the rules, if you look at it, you're going to see that 2 years, they must follow up. It is there.
Let me bring Mr. Manik-Chan, sorry, and Ms. Beckles into the conversation, specifically to give us a sense of what your experience had been like when you were incarcerated and what your reintegration experience was before I veer to Member West. So I'll start with Ms. Beckles first, please.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee. All right, before I was released, my experience while being incarcerated was somewhat not as bad as some will say. For the women's prison, I speak as a woman, it was a bit different. I was afforded the opportunity to learn. There was some days we were not afforded that opportunity because, to be honest, there were always different issues in the prison to take you to class, sometimes no tutor, sometimes the clients themselves teach you, or a person coming from the outside. However, there was some, to be honest, some personal behavior of some of the female officers. There's sometimes some issues they show, you know, they are not restorative in their mind. They will do it because they are mandated to do it, but sometimes we had some issues. So for me, I didn't really have issue for me, but I had colleagues at the time and their cellmates who had issues. Also, in being released, the welfare question, as Mr. Yuxi rightly said, it is supposed to happen. For me, it went up to 6 months. The welfare came, I had a tragedy. Of course, my former common law husband was murdered, so I came out with basically nothing, right? Welfare did follow up, did help and stuff, up to 6 months. However, after the 6 months official visit, I was living with my then now deceased pastor. The welfare came officially for 6 months. And I say officially because after that, I became a minister of the gospel. I started speaking in many churches, and the welfare now became a mentor to me. So it was no longer an official visit. So I will get the normal calls, how are you doing? But it was not official. The official went up to 6 months, to be honest, checking on me.
What year was that?
In 2016, I was released the 29th of March, a Tuesday morning. So,
Yes, just Mr. Manichan, what was your experience like?
Morning, Chair, morning, members of the committee. My experience within the prison, note I use the word prison, I don't use the word correctional. I don't use the word correctional facility. That's what it's called, a prison. And I would put it down, my period of incarceration was from 2002 to 2010. I would consider it as a holding bay, plain and simple. And basically no rehabilitation it had with education. Inmates taught inmates, but it was a struggle. The mindset of the officers depends on, it doesn't mean that all officers share the same view, from the junior to the superintendent to the commissioner. So a commissioner might have a certain ideology that he wants in place, but if it is not shared by the superintendent or shared by the officer who opens one cell to go out our class, it will never take place.
So what are you saying? You're saying that there may be a policy, but it's not enforced down the rank?
Yes.
Okay.
I would more put it as window dressing. Because I remember clearly one of my first experiences, I asked to go to the library. The exact word from the officer was, when he was outside, he didn't want to go to the library. Those were the kind of things I had to experience. Now, I taught in the prison, successfully inmates. I gave back because I was a little more educated. And to see people get a little certificate, it meant a lot. These people never finished secondary school. But the prison regime, the mentality that it had at present, I'd give an example. I asked permission to write my victim apology letter 2 years before I was released. It took me 2 years to appeal. It took 2 different superintendents who were saying, I'm not willing to give permission for that. I'm not putting my head. Let somebody higher do it. I said, but aren't you all saying restorative justice? No. Let somebody else do that. Until a next superintendent came, and he was of a different opinion. He said, write it, let me read it, and we'll mail it for you. So the prison, it depends on, there are many differences where I find prison lacks humanity, that prisoners should get more humanity in them, because that's what they lacked, first of all, many of them to go in there in the first place. Numerous examples. I wrote a letter to my mother at a time telling her I was feeling depressed. The prison suppressed the letter and carried me upstairs and told me, write happy thoughts. It's still on my prison file if anybody were to pull it today. So I was like, what do you mean, right? No, don't tell your mother. Make sure she feels everything is going good. Write happy thoughts. I said, but I feel depressed. Do you feel happy every day? My same mother, when she passed away, I was told from officers, don't cry, don't show signs of emotion, because this will be, the prisoner will be monitored, he may be considered volatile. He might swim the channel, as they say. So you have no signs of emotion to show. You have a welfare officer who will talk to you and say, well, you know, life, everything comes to an end. I recently now saw the prison is now hiring psychologists. So you could imagine a person who has anger management, rape, etc. Who they were talking to before? And I have seen these things over and over in the prison. Within the educational aspect, I used to beg. I say, let's do some new courses. I want to do A+ and networking, IT. Could we get somebody from outside, or families would pay for it? Stumbling block, because somebody up the chain doesn't agree.
Member West.
Chair, that segues well into the question I wanted to pose. Mr. Yuxi indicated that fairly recently we started an assessment and case management system, and that the prison officers do the assessment. If we are talking about moving from a situation of retribution to rehabilitation,
does it not require a retraining of the mindset of the prison officers? Has that occurred? Is that ongoing? How is that working? Have we changed the profile of persons we target to come into the system as prison officers?
That's a great question, actually, and a fundamental question. In 2002, that cabinet-appointed task force report that came out, which was actually a roadmap for transforming the Trinidad and Tobago prison service into a modern correctional facility, shifted the philosophy of the organization from retribution, which is deserved punishment for evil done, into restorative justice, which is a more holistic, humanistic approach in dealing with criminality. I want to say here that the organization, there's a story in that actually, in terms of organizational change. Notwithstanding that the policies were changed, I am saying that the mindset of officers, I think we still have some way to go. Meaning to say that we know we have not arrived as an organization where we're supposed to be, but we are nowhere where we used to be. So the point I'm making is you have something called cultural persistence. And that is something that the administration and the management of the organization has to treat very seriously with. Because at the end of the day, if there's one thing that I would like to see actually manifest itself in the prison service, in terms of the whole rehabilitative movement and everything that they're doing, is that shift in the mindset of the officers. Get that right. That actually is the low-hanging fruit. If we can get that right, it will spiral into so many other things. Yes.
The shift in mindset is not going to occur by osmosis. It is not going to occur unless the prison authority changes its mindset and philosophy from a prison to a corrections philosophy. What is going to be the catalyst for that? I mean, Mr. Walker seems chomping at the bit. Could you turn your mic off, please, Mr. Yuxi?
As an officer also attached to the training college, we know the need and importance of training and retraining. There's a course that we are dealing with the new batch of recruits. It has started a few years now with successive batches that have passed. We teach something called philosophy of the organization, where we look at collectively as a prison service what our mission is, what our vision is, what our strategic priorities are, so that we, in terms of protect, correct, relate, reintegrate, and restore, we try to impart to these young officers the need to move away from the retributive to the restorative, so that with the training, even with the older officers whom over the years would have shown some resistance, there needs to be a retraining, an ongoing retraining to bring everybody on board.
Can I interject? Just remember West, who is also chomping at the bit. I applaud the training and the attempt, but how can you, or is it possible to, instill that sort of approach in a situation where 12 men are held in an 8x6 cell in remand for 10 years under squalid conditions? Can you really instill any level of, any start of a restorative process in that kind of mindset, in that kind of environment? And the officers also exposed to those conditions?
Well, in terms of, that was one of the points that we were going to raise within the this JSC, in terms of the need to transform what we call a remand facility into a purposeful built prison. And not only that, we have to look at the length of time that a person stays on remand. This takes away from that intervention that we need to rehabilitate a person. Because we have persons in the remand facility who will be there for some upwards of 15 years. And sometimes when this period now, little or no intervention can be done. And when the court sentences this person, they will take into consideration the time spent on remand, and they might get a few months. When no intervention or little intervention could be made to help this person, especially when, as you say, a person locked away in a cell with very little facilities, like toilet facilities in cramped conditions, what mindset, what you as an officer could tell this person now to help them become transform to be a productive member of society. It's very difficult. That's why persons who, when they get discharged,
they're more
fall back in the same-
angrier.
Yeah, they're more
Before
angry.
I go to Member Hussein, Mr. Hughes, let me just go to Mr. Sinclair. Mr. Sinclair, Mr. Manik Chan and Ms. Beckles outlined their experiences in the system and their challenges in reintegration and what worked for them. What was your experience?
Mr. Chair, my experience was, I was fortunate that on release, the folks that I worked for, I was a gym instructor, so that they came to pick me up as soon as I was released from prison. But I was not made aware of any welfare assistance, so I think I was given what, like $10.50 or something like that when I was, yes. And, but other than that, I was not made aware of any welfare assistance that was available to me that I can tap into. That did not happen, but fortunately, you know, had folks who felt that they would have helped me reintegrate. So I was given a job at a gym, and they came and they picked me up actually upon release. That was my experience. But apart from that, the challenges to get to here 28 years later, it's humongous. It's almost like a roller coaster ride.
Before we go on, if I may,
Give me 1 second. Yeah. I'm going to come to you. I just want to bring, because we just want to be egalitarian. Let me bring the officials from the Way of Holiness and New Hope Prison Ministry in to let us know what your clientele has been telling you, if it echoes what you've heard from the ex-inmates, and what your thoughts are.
Mr. Chair and members, I must say, because I do pastoral care, I do not have that type of difficulty in the prison system, even with the officers. What happened is that when you see things in a godly manner and a godly fashion, you see it differently to someone that's not seeing it in that manner. What I recognize with the prison system is there's a lot of things they are working with little or no money. They are functioning with little or no money. How could a man be rehabilitated when there's rat running in and through the prison? When you look above you, even when I go to preach in Port of Spain prison, there's pigeon, and the number 2, the filth from the pigeon is right there. And the officers have to be there also. And we must understand that the officers have a life too. Some would react really badly because they are also making a prison, it's as though they're making time for prison. They're also making a prison system. I am saying, I know that a lot of people is being dealt with, might have been going through some things, but I have been in the prison for the past 23 years. And what I recognize is that because of being a church, we assist in many ways. We would bring in things like basketball rings for them, chairs, toilet paper, toothpaste, because sometimes the prison is out of these things. So what happened is that the prison is under such a strain that it's only God to help them. The more they ask for things, they're not getting it. And a lot of people are not on the inside to understand what the prison is going through, because the men would not even get a pen, a simple thing as a pen. An officer will have to take their money and sponsor a pen for these people. So what I'm saying is that I understand what they're saying. I, in turn, before the prison has come out to my establishment, because I consider what I'm doing very successful. And before they come to that establishment, they're already assessed by the prison. And then they're referred to me, and even I have a relationship with them. I believe that one of the areas in this nation that need to be looked into severely at this time in order to stop the crime in our nation is the prison system. Because working with men who, as you said before, that are in a cell, 10 men in a cell, the floor is dirty. They're peeing through the fence. You stand up, and when you look at the gate, they pee through the gate. They are taking time. When you look at the holistic approach and everything that's taking place in the system, it's just a place to break down and build over and start afresh. What we are trying to do, we are trying to ensure that people be rehabilitated in a dump. It's as though you're in a dump and we are looking for great success, and we are in a dump. Hence the reason why it's so important. I see a lot of things on the media, but they need to get behind the bars. They need to spend some time inside to understand what's taking place. We are very grateful. I believe it's only because of Almighty God that things are holding together still, in spite of. Because if you enter in, when I go into minister, a lot of men, they're still giving their heart to Jesus Christ. I baptized in about 2 months, a month or two ago, 40-something men, 10 Spanish amongst them. I'm saying that it's really good that we have a topic like this because a lot of people need to come and know the truth.
Thank you so much. Let me hear from Mr. Lacroix. Could you turn your mic on, please?
Good day again to everyone. You know, in my time of incarceration...
And what time was that?
1996 was my first incarceration. And the system was really, really poor, less developed than it is now. Now, I realized that officers and inmate contend with each other under really poor management. Because, I mean, we cannot put all the blame to the officers who come to do their jobs and face with harsh conditions. They are not comfortable enough to deal with inmates of all different walks of life who has their head mixed up a lot in different aspects of life. Now, one thing we must remember that we are all human beings. You understand? And you cannot take these guys, they are sick, ill-minded. And you haven't fellas who smoking marijuana, lock up for marijuana, some lock up for cocaine, and then it have murder and it have different types of criminal activity. And they put everybody and categorize them as one type of person, criminals, right? But we're dealing with criminals in different aspects. You understand? You cannot put the pressure on a marijuana offender with a murder offender. You understand? That's two different categories there. Yet still they banish them as one. They are all criminals. You understand? And to me, it works like this. The officers come to do their jobs, and some of them, I have seen officers naturally just waiting for the time of departure to come for them to go because they are frustrated. You understand? They cannot take that pressure. They cannot deal. There's nothing put in place by government to allow officers to really pursue their job in a relaxed manner. Everything is just a frustration. Everybody on edge. Inmates and officers on edge. You understand? Something needs to be done about that. Now, I did 14 imprisonments, back and forth. You understand? Now, you might say, wow, but there's nothing put in place by government that when I re-enter society back then, that I could have gotten a job in some business place or the other.
So you went in and out of prison 14 times?
14 times.
For what kinds of offenses?
Marijuana, cocaine, larceny. You understand? On my 14th imprisonment, I decided, I say, Lord, this is not what you created me for. I talked to myself. My family spoke to me, friends, strangers, and the last person was to speak to me was myself. And I did so. And I realized that, this is not what is best for me in life. You understand? I need to pick up on myself. I need to be a better person in society. This is not the way I'm supposed to go. And then when I think this way, God intervened into my heart and said, son, I does not want that for you neither. You understand? And I decided to do something for myself in a different way of life. You understand? I want to be counted as a good person in society, whereby I can go on to help people that is in situations similar to mine or even worse, to be better persons in society.
So you made a conscious decision?
A conscious decision.
Let me go to thank you for your testimony. Let me go to Mr. Barker, please.
Let me say good morning, brothers and sisters. Yeah, and another appreciation, I'm listening to my time imprisonment was in 1975, so totally different. Totally different. I have a different experience.
And what were you convicted of? If you
I
care to
was
share.
convicted of robbery with aggravation. But you know, I did not do the crime. I never say I didn't do crime, you know. Because I was a fella that don't skylark with me. I deal with you. But on that occasion, I came through the black power business and they gave me a frame case to get me out. And they put me in jail. And when I was in jail, I recognized that the system was very uneducated to the proper system of operation. The people didn't know the history. They didn't know nothing about anything else, neither prisoners, neither officers. So they did not know. And to the fact then, this is where we open up a school. And some of the officers come and help us and things. Really and truly, they were very nice. Appreciation. And to understand that that is how. I believe that God do that because they didn't have anything. To me, my personal agreement, right? When I came out of prison, I didn't have no officer to come and say to visit you and things. In my 13 years, I get $110. I come out and I pay for a fella that they charge him $100. I pay for a fella to come out of jail and I tell him, keep the money. He's all right, pay for him. So then it's a different thing. So my experience is a different experience to the situation because of the ministry that Collins Rosales and myself and that is where you had fellas like Wayne Chance and all of this. I could also bear witness for some officers in my time, right? They came superintendent and things, right? Because even Mr. Baptiste called me. Well, let me go back to Mr. Hokilis. It's Mr. Hokilis that called me and gave me the job as spiritual counselor into the prison, you know. Mr. Hokilis, you know, because he saw my potential in jail, in class, and all of this thing. So it was a different thing.
So your behavior and your behaviors in while incarcerated was an important factor in you changing your life coming out?
No, you see, to say that, you see, my imprisonment was, in my mind, was an educated idea of a system of oppression. So I would think differently. I came through the black power thing. So I was thinking differently that my brothers and sisters was oppressed. Even the officers I talked to, and I recognize the answer they give me because, look at, if you go to a fella, if I ask you a question, what is the biggest room in any house? You could answer me?
It depends on the house.
Well then, if you ask me, I could tell you. Tell me, ask me.
What is the biggest room in any house?
Room for improvement.
Thank you.
Right.
I'm going to ask you to put a pause there, Mr. Barker.
No.
Yeah,
what I am saying is how we think.
Yeah.
Right. The hottest cup of tea to me, is honesty, sincerity. You see, that is to me. I would think, I told you I would think differently. If you spell sin backwardly, what do you get? NISN, National Insurance, Jesus is mine.
All right, Mr. Barker, put a pin.
Well, you see that what I'm saying?
Put a pin, right?
No, when you say put a pin.
Yeah, because we have a limited time and we want to get everyone.
Well,
all right? Thank you very much.
Start a little more earlier when you're calling
Next
people.
time. Mr. Garcia, could you give us your comments on what you've heard so far, please, and your experiences with interface? Thank you for that, Mr. Barker.
I know you are good friend. I know you know.
Okay, I've been in the system. I've been a prison officer for over 35 years, now retired. I sit here, I'm pleased hearing all the niceties that the prison should offer as it relates to reintegration of the inmates. In my time, which was 9 years ago, I retired at 2010, inmates' problem, in my view, as it relates to reintegration, is family life while being discharged. The faith-based ministries played an important part in getting family to be in line with the inmates while incarcerated, as to having the family knowing what is being done as for the re-entry back into society. Part of the biggest problem, in my view, was a memory. How do we erase the memory of an inmate family when going back out to meet them? So we put a lot of stress on the spiritual development, having the pastors who interact with the family on the outside, letting them know the work that was being done in the prison to accept them back when we enter back into society. In my view, that was the biggest and is still the memory. How do you erase the memory? People normally remember how it was. All the work that we do in the prison, people doesn't understand what you're doing. So on seeing you on discharge, they remembers how you was. So if you could get a link, a proper pre-release program to go into a post-release program, whereas the pastors, the ministries, the people of God could interface with society on the outside, having them know what is being done on the inside, that will help a lot, in my view, into the reintegration, successful integration of offenders.
Thank you. Member Hussain.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to ask a question, and it's really several. And I don't, if I can ask the prisons, but also I need to get input from my guests who have been in the system. And that is, I know that Mr. Walcott, you indicated that earlier, that the prisoners have more, the prison officers more or less, you have been looking at trying to, you spoke about protect, correct, and really encouraging them to think restorative as opposed to retributive. And my question is really, with the type of laws that were recently enacted, you find that it is more, the sentences and so forth is more punitive, and therefore there's little room for restoration. And how does this impact upon what your thoughts are on the direction this committee is going? And how often does the Mercy Committee meet? And for the persons who are here, what about your records being expunged? How does this all impact upon?
Yes, again, you have to look at rehabilitation and reintegration from the perspective, because I heard the chairman, Mr. Paul Richards, talk about how can you reintegrate or rehabilitate when you're in a small cell with a number of persons. And I just want to make the distinction quickly. There are two areas in the prison service. There's the convicted section, and there's the unconvicted section, the remand section. We really have no real mandate to rehabilitate unconvicted inmates. Of course, based on the tardiness of the judicial system, unfortunately, we have them for extended periods of time, and it will be wise to develop programs for them, but we'll reach to that. as
All
it
right,
regard
put
to
a
the...
pause. You just hit on a critical point
Yes.
in this entire phenomenon. Because if you are stating as the head of the Prison Officers Association that you have no mandate to provide rehabilitation services to the largest portion of the inmate population, which is the remandees, 3,500. Is that correct?
That's absolutely...
Compared to convicted. Therein lies the problem.
Well, right,
because
and
these individuals are spending up to 15 years.
More than that, we have people 17 years in prison as we speak,
I
awaiting
stand
justice.
corrected. 17 years in particularly horrible environments. And there is no mandate from the prison service to start to understand that the rehabilitation process, as you rightly said, starts from your interface with law enforcement, going through the court system, your conditions of remand, into your conditions as a convicted inmate, and through the system. So if there is no mandate for the prison service and prison officers to provide restorative justice services and rehabilitation services to remandees, we might as well end this session now and go home.
Well, you see, Paul, we have to understand something here, right? Unconvicted inmates were not supposed to stay that long within our system.
But they
No,
are.
I'm getting
But
to
they
that,
are.
Mr. Chair. I'm getting to where you are going. Just allow me. I'm getting to where you are going. Unfortunately for us, because the judicial system has its issues, we end up in a situation where persons are spending inordinate length of time in the remand, coupled with the fact that there's this type of conditions, given the fact that we have no purpose-built remand facility in Trinidad and Tobago. In other words, a purpose-built facility that is designed to treat with the needs of remandees. We don't have that. What we have is the fact that the minister could deem any building a prison. A building was deemed a prison, right, by the minister, and that building was now customized somewhat to fulfill some needs. Now, why I went there is for one simple reason. Just as you are saying, if we cannot effectively manage or treat with remandees, then we would have, what we'll be doing is effectively undermining our ability to treat with the convicted, because the convicted come from that very remand. And once persons feel that their rights would have been taken away unfairly, persons feel that they were continuously exposed to extreme conditions of every kind, right? Because one politician summed it up as jail designed to ripe fig, right? The fact is those persons will be angry. Prison officers cannot treat with that level of discontent and demotivation. When those persons get convicted and they go to the convicted section where our definitive mandate is to treat and rehabilitate and so on, far and apart from providing security, there's something where you get into some sort of problems because the type of mindset going there. But even at the side of that, you have situations where when persons come into the remand stay long periods, for example, 15 years, 17 years, when they are convicted, based on the length of time they stay on the remand, those times often are removed from their sentences, and they don't even go to the convicted section. They are released back into society, if you all understand where I'm going. So
basically jump over the one
that's
small
correct.
time
That's correct.
when they could be exposed to
that's
restorative
correct.
justice
So what
protocols.
happened, you would have lost the opportunity to properly rehabilitate and reintegrate by virtue of a judicial system that is in dire need of repair.
Put a pause. While I agree with you, several of the ex-inmates here, if not all today, with the exception of, I think, Miss Beckles, spoke about the inconsistency of the officers' treatment of the inmates themselves, even in the absence of a stated rehabilitation mandate. Let me finish. The officers themselves, in many instances, as human beings, seem to be part of the problem.
And I agree. I am in total agreement of that. But you have to understand the evolution. We started with one dispensation, one philosophy, which is retribution, that was engraved. As a matter of fact, I want to even tell you, going further than that, that Trinidad and Tobago itself, the mentality of citizens is largely retributive. So if you have to go to restoration, right, you have to change the mindset of all the human beings in a society, inmates, officers, right? So that change, as you said earlier, wasn't managed properly from the time of the task force report, because the strategic head should have done more to ensure that that is rolled down to the line staff, whatever procedures, practices, policies would have been put in place at that time to ensure. So officers who naturally is part of society, who is naturally prone and conditioned to this retributive system, it is very difficult, based on what Mr. Yuxi was saying earlier, that change is very hard.
While I agree with you to some extent, it reminds me of the often used metaphor or euphemism that the several sectors use. Well, we're all a subset of the wider society, so we have to understand blah, 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 blah. I think with the greatest of respect that while it is generally true, I think an opportunity exists within the association and the officer population at large to make an intervention in the absence of a stated policy. So while, yes, we all come from a particular jurisdiction, and the jurisdiction may have a mindset, well, all prisoner bad, all inmate bad, I think the positioning and the opportunity exist in the association to try an intervention through its influence on its officers to have a different mindset, whether it be through their training or through your daily interactions.
And we haven't said that we won't.
Just a minute, Member West.
Mr. Chair, that takes me to the follow-up question I had about an hour ago to Mr. Walcott. I know we said that we train the officers as they come in to take a different approach, but in our assessment and progression of these officers, do we focus on officers who are taking that different approach to promote them so that we get a continuous improvement in the approach of officers, or do we just train them and put them in the system and however they operate, they operate?
Well, in terms of training, and we have a system where we monitor performance through job evaluation, but that system is not, to our liking, we wouldn't say it is very effective. So with regards to the persons who are performing going forward, their performance appraisals would reflect this, but then it must be done properly to capture this. And I don't think that is done. Just one more thing, regards to what Mr. Richards spoke about, regards to the remand population and introducing programs. You see the difficulty. You have to look at the concept of convicted and unconvicted. An unconvicted person is said to be innocent until proven guilty. In his mind, he says, here we go, I'm not convicted of anything. And when a person goes to court, every time they go to court, they go as a dischargee. So when they go to court, every time they go, there is a possibility that they would not return. So having proper intervention at this level sometimes would not make sense. And the thing is, the key problem is this, that nobody should be in prison this length of time before their matter is determined. So that when, you see, for 15 years, that is a ridiculous amount of time. It's either you have the evidence or you don't. So get the persons, whether or not they are convicted of their crime, get them into the convicted section where intervention could take place. This makes practical sense.
Member West, just as a follow-up, and then Member Ford.
Yes. I know I'm focusing on the prison officers. It is not that I'm ignoring the other parts of the broken system, but because you are before us, I want to focus on that issue. So you indicated that the assessments are not properly done. Who is responsible for that, and how do we change it?
Well, remember, when you have objectives as an organization, somebody has to carry out the objectives. the employees, the officers, are the one charged with responsibilities to carry out those objectives. Those objectives have to be, they have to be continued to be monitored and measured, and to determine the extent to which these objectives are being carried out. The system that you will employ in almost any organization to measure and to track performance is a performance management system. And attached to that is a performance appraisals done periodically during the years, right? Ideally, performance appraisals are done twice per year. In some organizations, they do it as much as every quarter. So if you don't have a proper performance management system, and what constitutes a proper performance management system? A system where the supervisor or the person who monitors the performance sits with the officer, sit with the person, and set objectives to be met. And those objectives are supposed to be in alignment with what is expected of the officer based on the strategic direction that we are going, right? So until and unless you have these performance measures being done and evaluated and connected to maybe a proper reward system and so on, because performance management is usually connected to a reward system. In the prison system, it's connected to increments, it is connected to promotions, it is connected to a number of things that officers will like to achieve.
Mr. Richards, can I ask you to supply that those IR challenges in writing to us in the interest of the time that we have left?
Yeah.
And so you can outline exactly what Member West asked you, Member Ford.
Just a follow-up to the Prison Officers Association. There were 3 bills that readily come to mind that would have been tabled right within the last sitting of Parliament, which is one, the bail amendment bill trial without jury, judge only, and also the elimination of preliminary inquiries. Again, in terms of an opinion coming from your association, and with regards to the comment that you made of the delays in the justice system, all right, how do you see those?
Well,
those 3 bills
certainly
fitting
the last one that you spoke about, the movement of the preliminary inquiries, that is an excellent idea. And I say that against the backdrop that a lot of cases are stopped at the magistrate level. That preliminary inquiry level, that level is where a matter is determined to be heard at the assizes. And if we could efficiently, as a country, right, remove it and have those cases moving along, then that will be a plus to the prison system. Definitely, it will have a positive impact on what we see happening at the remand prison at this time. And we, the Prison Officers Association, would like to support the AG, the Attorney General, the Honorable Attorney General, in that endeavor. Because we have inmates, and would you believe, who have over 6 years incarcerated, waiting for their cases to be determined as to whether or not they have a case to hear at the assizes, and they are at the preliminary inquiry stage. That is cruel and extremely unusual punishment. To have a person incarcerated in remand prison for over 5 years at the preliminary inquiry stage, and it is very normal to see those cases existing in the prison service. That in itself wreaks discontent. As a matter of fact, inmates are so frustrated in that type of scenario, that they are very unsettling. If you look at, if you track over time, most of our serious incidences in the remand prison, it is owing to some of these problems that we are now highlighting.
Absolute frustration. I want to change the gears a bit and bring Mr. Manik-Chan back into the conversation, because I think we've pretty thoroughly perused the internal issues. But upon being released, the issue of employment, and I know many of the others would have had what I would describe as special interventions, because they're either caring family members, pastoral services, or religious intervention, religious group intervention, that would have facilitated a smoother transition. So they had support not necessarily provided by policy from the state. Mr. Manik-Chan, you went through a particularly different situation where you were employed and you had a matter before the courts because your employment was terminated or not renewed because of your ex-convict status. Let's hear about it and the importance of employment opportunities in the context of, well, if I can't get a job when I come back out to take care of myself, I'm more than likely going to reoffend to take care of my client, stay down and starve. So.
Well, yes. One of the greatest issues is employment opportunities. I sought employment within the public service area, and I gained employment as a litter prevention warden from 2013 to 2016. Now, I have always been honest to every employer, even if they did not ask for a certificate of character, about my conviction, because it was an infamous one. I'm always thanked about it, but at the end of the day, they either say management might have a problem with this issue. But in this particular instance, I was hired for 3 years as a litter prevention warden. And when my contract came to end, I went back for application. This time they requested a certificate of character. But I had always told them, I told my supervisors, my head of departments, and I was well commended for it. When I was not renewed, the union took the matter, and we ended up going straight to the chief personnel officer, who stated there's a government policy that no one with a conviction can be hired within the public service. So I said, well, we want to see it.
What year was this?
Pardon? This was in 2017. All right. I said.
So recently.
Yes. So we said we wanted to see it. So they said, no, this is a long-standing government policy. So I said, well, okay. And through Freedom of Information, I wrote Ministry of Labor, I wrote the CPO. I said, well, I want to see the policy. Everybody backtracked and said, well, we don't have a policy, but it's a sort of practice. So they said, we deliberated because of the seriousness of your offense. We did not decide to renew your contract. Again, we took it to industrial court because I wanted to know, how did you deliberate if you never asked me anything about the conviction, although I have told you over and over and over. I also submitted the findings of the court in the ruling where I was awarded damages because basically the court found the ministry had no policy. The ministry said they sought advice from the CPO and other agencies. When I asked for the advice, I was told the advice wasn't given in a written format. There seems to be no government policy dealing with the recruitment. There's only theories. If 10 years pass, it doesn't count. If you do this crime, you can't get a job here. But the fact about it, there is no policy. They have had people who have been hired in the public service before, and they have indicated to me that they got hired because of political affiliation. A government in power, they were aligned, they got the job because a permanent secretary would have given them, even though they knew they had the conviction. It wasn't an issue. But at the end of the day, there seems to be no clear policy. And when I go for jobs within the public service...
Excuse 1 second,
sure.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Again, the statement you're making, you have documentary evidence to support
Yes, I do. I have submitted all evidence towards the court. I have written ministers. I have gone by MPs who have told me, I'm not calling the MP's name, but an MP told me, he understood my situation. He said, here, change your last name. Right? I'm not going to call his name, but if you wish, I would. Right? I've been told by other MPs, take them to court. The situation it's a quagmire. It's a problem. There is nothing, and society doesn't lack the will either.
So the state is also complicit in the issue?
The state is also complicit in many ways. For instance, in Parliament, how many times for political mileage has, across the floor, have they stated this one has a conviction, that one has a conviction? How do we expect members of the community to want to hire somebody when you yourself in Parliament are throwing talk at each other, stating, I wouldn't have that one with a conviction, she's going to jail, I hope it have good rehabilitative programs out there. How do we expect?
That may be a different context. Member Hussein.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I know that Mr. Manikchan had indicated the challenges for Ms. Beckles. I know that you had indicated some challenges regarding getting simple stuff like, your driver's permit and assistance from Ministry of Social Development. Could you identify what those challenges are and if they are still persistent today with the persons that you assist?
Okay, good. Thank you. Well, one of my challenges was, for instance, when I came out of prison on the 29th of March, I had no ID. Everything was expired. So when I went to the licensing office, they charged me $1,700 to get a new driver's license. Two reasons why. One, they said it's either you do over the test and pay $500. At that time, I want an ID because there were people wanting to help me abroad to get money via Western Union. I needed an ID. I paid the $1,700 because when I left prison, I received $200 for my labor for the 5 years, 4 months, $30 transportation from welfare. But there were officers. I said everybody walk is different. There were female officers who pooled and gave me a sum of money in an envelope. I was able to use that exact sum of money to pay for the license. They told me walk with a letter from the prison. I did get a letter from the welfare department on New Street. I rushed back down to licensing St. James. They said the letter was not appropriate. It had to come months before from the prison or dated. It was dated the very day. I paid the same $1,700, which was hard because I have a daughter with me. I had lost everything and I was now going to a pastor's home.
Just asking Mr. Richards to intervene in this. Is it that there's a procedure where you provide a letter to any of the state agencies to indicate that, okay, this person has been a prisoner and therefore we are asking for courtesy in this regard, for getting your ID or your driver's
Yes, there
permit?
is, but I will let Mr. Yuxi answer that more clear.
No, I don't want to take away from Ms. Beckles, huh?
Yes, there is an established procedure that months before, especially that pre-release period and so on, all the various needs are identified for that particular offender, and documents are done, letters are typed and all these things and so on for the various agencies as the case might be.
All right, so.
And I want
so
to
you
beg to
didn't get- you did
differ.
not
I
get
But
did
it didn't
not-
happen with her.
I did
Yeah.
not get any letter. They did a case study before
Yes.
you leave. They have everything on file about me, right? So you come out with your money. However, if you are going, because when I went down to licensing with my sister, who is a prominent business, they told me, I said, I now come out of prison. I spoke very raw. I said, I just come out of prison. I come back to renew my license, thinking it's just the $500. The woman said, well, okay, could you have a letter? I said, no. I then met a then former prison superintendent female. She works with the judiciary now on another level. She said, run up to New Street, let them give you a letter. I did get the letter upon request. It wasn't I didn't get letters stated, go to here and there and go there. It was upon request. You will get the letter if you ask for it, but I did not get it in my hand walking out. I then got the letter from the welfare. Taking it would have helped me. It did not. The person at the desk at our Ministry of Transport said, no, the letter should have come a little earlier, and I paid my $1,700.
Why was it 1,700?
She said because the period of time that my license was expired.
Or basically a restart?
Yes, and they charged me that, sir. Secondly, for the ID card, right? Secondly, of course, everyone knew I had help from my pastor, but it was temporal. Getting a job for me, I went and work at a former university of this country. There are many universities. I worked at one before I was incarcerated as a clerk one. However, in the form before, I did not have a conviction, so they gave me the opportunity, manners, and to get the job. When I came back out, I thinking I can go back and sweet talk my way to get back a job at that establishment. I was blatantly told silently on the side, don't even try to apply again, because now that you have a record, let's move away from the establishment of the big university. I wanted to get back a job. I went several other places to get a job. They started off nicely when they gave me the job. Some of them don't have the paperwork with conviction on the end, so you get the job for a good smile, your little education. Then when they found out somebody, and I have other case study of women I could bring here who were working places, and somebody came and said, hey, you come out of jail. Real talk. And then you hear them in the next sentence, and something similar happened to me, but not in a bad way. The person gently said, well, the contract is over, in a small way. Right? So I was then ridiculed somewhat in a very, or marginalized, use the big word, in a very high fashion way. They didn't do it in a raw way. Thirdly, I spoke about, I got a job then with Vision and Mission. I went there because I remember their program among Miss Kelly and others, but they were the ones at the time. I didn't want housing because I was at my pastor's room. but they gave me a job, all right? And that was one of the establishments that gave me a job because they knew my story. There was no prejudiceness, but I have faced prejudiceness in very subtle ways because of where I was. They did not see where I was trying to go and where I was. Another recommendation I made, and something I want to touch on before I move on. In my tenure of 2010, the 6th of December, charged by the High Court of Trinidad and Tobago, till the 29th of March, I got 7 days release early for good behavior. My tenure, I was a Joseph in prison. I was loved, I was respected. I did not go in there like they owe me something. Everybody's walk is different. Right? Miss Kelly knows me very well from India, being in all the programs. I took what little and made much of it, because I always think rehabilitation is a personal thing. It's a personal thing. I can speak from experience. There are remanded clients in my tenure, I can speak from 2010 to 2006, that went to school, participated in programs, especially the ones that were there for capital offenses. They taught me. It was a client on a AT that taught me maths. She then did maths and got her distinction in there. She's coming out in January. There were other ATs and AA. I was an AA and went to school in there and received 4 CXC subjects. Finished the rest when I got convicted.
What is an AA?
A waiting appeal. Right? So I waited a year and a month before I got the dress, which we call convicted. So once I can speak for women's prison in my tenure, there are remanded that go to school, but mostly those who are on capital offense, ATs waiting trial, which is we see the reason why, long stays, right? And AAs are waiting appeal. So I want to correct that for women's prison, women go to school.
Thank you.
Ms. West, Member West, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Ms. Beckles, you indicated that you were assisted when you came out by Vision on Mission.
Yes.
And that is the role that we understand in the public generally that they perform. But Mr. Manik-Chan, on the other hand, in your submission, didn't suggest that you got the kind of support that you thought you should have got. So can you comment on your experience versus what we heard from Ms. Beckles, please?
Okay, the support that I got, I didn't have no living family residing, but I had friends who basically were the cushion that provided basically acclimatization for 6 months. My family had, my mother, as I said, passed away, so I had a premises to go to, but it was basically abandoned and needed some remedial work with utilities, etc. And during that 6 months, my friends basically assisted me in giving me a little shelter, clothes, and showing me how things were about, assisting me, because I agree with Ms. Beckles and with the ID card, driver's permit. If you have no documentation and you have to start over from scratch, now these are things which I think could be done before you leave prison. It's not rocket science, right? So when you come outside, so you're basically, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't open up a bank account or anything at that point in time. And when I got onto my feet, the first thing I would have done is I went to educate myself by getting a degree, right? Again, it was quite hard because I'm shy, and when somebody says Wi-Fi, I was like, what's that, right? I don't know, I was locked away. I was locked away. I was locked away when it had infrared, right? So but again, from adversary builds strength that I was the class Victorian in my year, right? That after the first year of being quiet, everybody used to come and ask me the questions because I worked for it harder.
Just a quick intervention, Mr. Manik-Chan. Did you have an experience with Vision on Mission, and what was it? I'm trying to get this sense
my experience with Vision on Mission, I called them regarding employment. So I told them I would email my resume. So apparently that was the first thing. Nobody's really emailed resume, but go ahead. And when I have diplomas and so forth, they were like, okay, we do really have work in line for you, and more of our work is towards the northern area. So I asked them if anything could be, is there anything in the south? Now, this is after I tried on my own. I am still up to this day. I am a degree holder, went for a work in JTA to pack shelves and was refused, right? Peak timer in courts, and they called me, and as soon as they say I have a conviction, we'll call you back. If we do call you back, don't bother to call. Right? I have lowered my standards. It's not a problem for me.
right? Because money, at the end of the day, bills, when they don't ask you where the money comes from, you have to pay your bills. And I have tried, so not to say a vision and a mission, I tried with them, it didn't help, but at the end of the day, I still go about trying for myself. And to be quite honest, if I had shut my mouth and didn't say I have a conviction, I would have been employed today. Honesty really does not work here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Manichan. Unfortunately, we're into the final 10 minutes of the interface, and we apologize because it's a large group because of the postponement of last week's interface. So we thank you for coming. I'm going to start to ask persons in there to provide their wrap-up in hopefully a minute. Starting with Mrs. Sinclair, we apologize again, but it's just the time we have.
So, Chairman, I wish this sessions like these, I've been waiting for this for the last 28 years. And this, we just barely scratched the surface here.
And everyone can supply comments and document. And we
right.
Can be,
The problem is if anything is going to come out of this, first of all, because we have so many areas that we were yet to speak about, like the rehab situation and magistrates understanding people with drug problems who are predisposed and, you know, people are not criminals coming before them. Half of the remand can be emptied if magistrates understand this. But there must be a connectivity with the judiciary and dependency advocated for drug treatment courts. The magistrates not using them. We advocated for rehab facility in the prison, they shut it down. So from government to government, things change. Nothing is carved in stone. We need to have things carved in stone, so when our government changes, they cannot touch a rehab facility in the prison because it is mandatory. And that is our problem. We continue to run around in a circle, and unfortunately, we are going to be here next year again if we continue the way we're going. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity, little as it was. The anxiety was more than the contribution, I could tell you. But I'm really hoping that this can continue because society needs to hear where we're falling short. And finally, if leaders of the pack, and when I say leaders of the pack, I mean both government and opposition, can stand on platforms and preach to the population that we must now take a corrective approach instead of retributive to people coming out of prison, I think it has to start from there. When the leader of the flock says, let's go left, everybody will follow. But if they don't do that and we continue to hear terms like, well, JLM make the ripe fig, we continue to speak like that, I think society will continue to see us like that.
Thank you, and you can supply some of your suggestions and recommendations, which we will factor into our recommendations, and we will have follow-ups to see how many of the recommendations are actually adopted, because it's part of our protocol. Mr. Richards.
When you look at reintegration, it is evident that society plays a big part in effective rehabilitation, and coming out of this meeting, you could clearly summarize that society is a bit apprehensive as it regard to facilitating the proper reintegration of inmates back into society. I would like that the government play a key role in sort of motivating people to assist in that regard, and I'm looking at the area of employability. We as a country, as a government, people benefit when businesses benefit when they display good corporate social responsibilities. When businesses give donations for sports or they sponsor events and so on, they get some relaxation back in taxes and different benefits for that. Maybe the time has come to create additional incentives for persons who maybe employ ex-inmates who keep them within the employment and so on. There must be some incentives so that people believe, well, look, listen, the government has our backs, so we will open up ourselves to, you know, to facilitating opportunities and so on. The other thing is we need proper legislative support. We need definitives in terms of policies that will develop practices that are facilitating to that process as well. So it cannot be vike that you go to this employer and you get a different response to the other employer, and there's a lot of inconsistencies and so on. If you have a political friend where then an opportunity might open up and so on. We need to be very consistent as it regard to, and a good way to usher in some sort of consistency is through laws, policies, and practices that are standard, right? And everyone will, will have to conform with that. So in terms of that, we really have to pursue those objectives. Now, one of the things that I would like to see happen also, because when you go to the security industry,
30 seconds, please.
you see a lot of inmates end up in the security industry because those industries virtually take people without records and without looking at records and so on. And then they are exploited. So I want the government and society to know that if we want to facilitate proper reintegration cannot be treated with true exploitation. I have gotten a lot of ex-inmates who said that they have been exploited in the security industry, having to work 14 hours without proper terms and conditions and so on, because the managers know that they cannot get another job anywhere else, and there are no conditions to this kind of scenario. So we will want policies, practices, and incentives that will assist society to conform to those type of objectives.
Thank you, Pastor Kelly, on behalf of the organization.
On behalf of the organization, Mr. Chair and members, I would really like to see, I do not want anything from the state. God is taking care of me and the organization. All I would love to have is after we take care of them and they're ready to get a job, is that the state provides somewhere for me to send them. Because what happened is that I will keep them for 2 years, sometimes even more, because they're not getting employment, just as they were saying. So I am, as a church, even the members of the church, people assist us by giving us free will offering to take care of it. But if we can just get someone to take them up on, and please, the church can see the difference when God can change people. God can change people. I'm looking at Trinidad and Tobago, and all I'm encouraging even today is that other churches get involved and assist for this to become a reality. I'm looking forward for change, but please, when we work hard with them, could you all please assist us to take them and give them a job so that they wouldn't go back into what they've been into? I have one more point. What is happening? There are some people who would not be able to come to places like the place that we have, but they have their families. And you know what we catch ourselves doing? We have to give them finances so that they would not go back in crime. Some sleeping on mattresses on the ground with family and cannot afford it. So I am just appealing, please help us by putting something in place to assist them that when they come out of centers like ours, they can have somewhere to go and a stipend until they catch themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pastor Kelly. On behalf of New Hope Prison Ministry, Mr. Barker.
Yes, I have two requests right now.
Could you turn your mic, please?
I'll make it in my thing. Right now, I'm fixing the computer places when fellas come out of prison, they just get a computer with Mr. Clyde Haynes. And right now, I want some cement when I'm going up to buy and put on the tile and everything. Right now. I want to write to no government and thing right now. So all who have little money, they could put together and give me it. I could buy me cement right now. And no other thing. I'm making no request, no other how. And then we love one another and forget all the things because we're born sinful and we're supposed to help one another. That is my request. So if all you could put a little thing for me and see if I could get a little 10 bags of cement, I'm glad to get it. And then I could know all you start to work. So if you could use your office right there and say, oh, you put something and give it to him. I go buy my cement when I'm going up. And you could send it mates when they come out of jail that they use the computer class with Mr. Clyde Haynes. What you say? Say amen one time.
Amen.
Thank you, right. So I go get something.
Thank you, Ms.
Right.
Beckles. Reverend Beckles, sorry.
Yes. Thank you again. I would like to thank the chair and the committee for having me here. It's a really awesome feeling, a bit nervous, but I just want to say I want to see more done for female clients. Female clients are being taken advantage of in many different ways. And I sit here for a female client, and I want things to be put in place for females. You know, the men can go out there and do a security job. The men can fill in a van. But for women, it is very hard, and we are taken advantage of in different areas. There are so many things I, as a woman, has faced, especially when they know who I was affiliated to, why I went to prison, and now I'm out, right? But it's too much to mention now. I want to see more done for women, housing, especially women for children. Because when homes will take women, we have children. That was one of my issues. Right, so I want to see more done for women, especially with jobs and housing, records being clean, because we are getting opportunities. Women get opportunities sometimes faster than men. But at the end of the day, people are securing their business. Oh, she was in jail for drugs. Wow. Last but not least, I just want to say this. You know, I'm not all into researches, but I looked up some of the sections, and I believe Section 34 would have benefited in some of these issues, because a lot of it we are speaking here directs to that. My friend here, my colleague, Dane, he's more into the research. But I just want to see more done for women because, again, women are being exploited out here by some of the big hierarchies because your pretty face could take you as far. But when they find out, they start to manipulate and talk a talk. And not all women are like me to try to stand on your 2 feet, as my mentor, Miss Kelly, said, with God. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manik-Chan.
Yes, what I would like to see is that, again, as I agree with many of the comments that have been made before me, and I would like to see policies and legislations regarding employment of individuals who have convictions put in place with the public service so they don't make ad hoc decisions. They have some guidelines. HR individuals within the public sector especially do not know what to do. I would also like, when laws are put in place, such as the Public Procurement and Disposal of Property Act, you all pay attention to the fine details. For example, that act has a clause that if a person has a conviction and is a director on a company, no services or goods could be provided from government agencies. God forbid if Mr. Chance does not have a pardon, it is actually, when the act is proclaimed, possible that he will not be able to get subvention due to this simple clause that has no guidelines. I have actually spoken to the chairman about it, and he and all agreed they have written to the AG on recommendations because there's no guidelines on it. And there are other laws also that have these things in effect. So this kind of gives the idea that, okay, you have a conviction, government agencies can't deal with you. So how does John Public supposed to hire us? Thank you very much.
I would like to thank you all for your appearance here today and your significant contributions, and remind you that if there's anything you were not able to divulge or discuss today, please feel free to submit it through the Secretariat in writing, and we will certainly factor it into our considerations for our final recommendations and our follow-up in terms of monitoring if the recommendations were actually implemented and how they were implemented with a view to achieving our committee's objectives. We'd also like to thank members of the media, observers in the public gallery, and the viewing and listening audience. Just before we adjourn, announcement on the committee's reports. The public is advised that the following reports of the committee were recently presented in Parliament and are now available for review on the Parliament's website, ttparliament.org, which are the 11th report of the committee on a follow-up inquiry into the effectiveness of the state's interventions directed at socially displaced persons, and also the 12th report of the committee on an examination of the current level of childhood obesity and the state's interventions to promote a healthy lifestyle among children. At this time, we'd like to bring today's proceedings to an end. Thank you very much for viewing and listening and for being here.